How do you think Mrs. Ayrton's going to take this news, Rick?
Not well.
Many people will have seen that humorous clip of Rick, who obviously humorous clip, not so humorous situation. Rick was on oxygen because he had the symptoms of decompression illness and was subsequently evacuated. I'm really pleased that Rick is here with me to talk about the dive and the incident and everything that happened. So good evening, Rick.
Hi, Dom. Yes, I'm glad to be here too.
Well, thank you very much. But I think there's an important question you need to answer before we go any further, which is, of course, how is Mrs. Ayrton?
Mrs. Ayrton is absolutely fine, and she had a lot of concern. We actually got an extra week-long holiday in Plymouth on the back of this. Not that I'd want to repeat it, but we did have a nice time together while I was undergoing the treatments, and yeah.
Well, what's not to like with a nice week in Plymouth? But no, seriously though, Rick.
Absolutely. Yeah.
How are you?
I'm almost back to normal, actually. I've still got a little bit of tingling on the skin of my left leg. And I think that's going to be something that's going to take a long time to resolve. But it's certainly livable with. And my walking's come back. And I think you've got a clip showing me going into the DDRC a couple of days after my first, or the day after my first treatment, where walking was tricky. It's virtually back to normal now, so I'm very pleased for that.
Yeah, I mean, that is fantastic news, and I'm really pleased as well. And I do have that clip later on, but it's great that you mentioned DDRC because lots of people might not know DDRC is the Diving Diseases Research Centre. It's one of the leading recompression chambers in the world, and certainly in the United Kingdom. And I think this video we are going to be doing a fundraiser to make money for funding DDRC. It is self-funded. It is a charity. So there's somewhere on this video there's a button that people can click, and if they want to contribute, that would obviously be absolutely fantastic and really appreciated.
Yeah, I don't know where I would have been without the emergency services and the DDRC. It's been it's fantastic, really.
Yeah, and I think we've got some video that shows in some detail your evacuation and exactly the service that was provided. So there's lots of that to come in the video. But I think before we do that, we probably just need to talk about the dive first of all, Rick.
Yeah.
Here you are. Here we all are.
Here we all are on Deco. Yes, it was a strange one, and looking back on it, there were a couple of things that happened to me on the dive or on the ascent from the dive that were a little bit strange. I remember, I can't remember exactly, but I think it was because I was actually last up the shot line and I released the lazy shot. And I think it was at around about 50 meters on the ascent. I got pain in my guts, in my abdomen, so sort of around about there, which gradually increased in intensity to the point where I started thinking, oh my dear, what am I going to do? I've got all these, best part of an hour and a half of decompression to do, and this pain is actually really uncomfortable. And I've never known any literature about abdominal pain being a sign of decompression sickness, and so my thoughts were, what had I just eaten? As usual on the boat, I'd had a hot cross bun and I'd had a sandwich and things like that, and I just wondered whether I'd eaten something funny, and I was getting some really rather unpleasant indigestion. But the strange thing was it sort of reached a peak and then tailed off, and it virtually disappeared. And but I think that little kink is where I probably cut the lazy and dropped a bit as I went off with the lazy, and then carried on the deco. I'm not sure at what point I wasn't aware of it anymore, but I certainly completed all the deco without any concerns. I think it was probably in mid-teens of the deco where I realised that the pain wasn't there anymore and it had disappeared. So, you know, I didn't put that down to being anything at all to do with a decompression incident. But then later on, when I was on the decompression trapeze at 6 meters, I was aware that one of my legs was warm. So sort of at this point here, one of my legs was warm and one of them was cold. So my right leg was warm and my left leg was cold. And my first thought was, I've sprung a leak in my dry suit and I'm getting wet, and that's what's making my leg cold. But then I realised that wasn't really the case. It wasn't severe or anything like that. And I think this is probably the one thing that I did wrong, and I didn't alert people on the boat when I got back up that had happened. I remember I said to you, I had guts ache on the dive, and then it sort of went once it surfaced. But I didn't say anything about the difference in leg temperature. And the strange thing was that it happened for a while, and then it was so minimal. You know, you got to the end of the dive, deco cleared, sort my camera out, and come to the surface. And by the time I got back on the boat, I'd sort of forgotten about it. And I got back on the boat and all seemed fine. I dekitted. I went down below in the sort of the forepeak of the boat and got changed back into dry clothes and so on. And yeah, we were sat down in the wheelhouse sort of on the way home. And you know, I don't know if you've got the video of the whales, because it was the whales that alerted me to the problem. So there was this massive bait ball or something going on, and we stopped. There were tuna jumping out of the water, there were dolphins, and then all of a sudden there were whales as well, which was just incredible. These two enormous fin whales, one of which jumped out of the water. It was like a bus coming out of the water and crashing back in. It's absolutely vast. But the boat stopped and we all stood up. And it was at that point that I realised I still had pins and needles I had pins and needles in that leg, because I'd been sat in a rather uncomfortable chair. So I stood up, had pins and needles, and thought, oh, well, that'll clear. But then it didn't. And at that point I said to everyone, I think I've got a problem, because I've got pins and needles that's not getting any better. And I was put on O2. The guys on the boat called it in, and yeah, the Coast Guard helicopter came to fetch me and take me into Plymouth to the DDRC.
Just going to go back to the deco profile here, you know, Rick, because lots of people, I think, will probably want to know things like, you know, how deep, how long, you know, how does compared to other diving you've done, and all those kind of things. And so I think it's probably worth covering, because, you know, I think we both view this as a not particularly aggressive dive, not particularly long dive, and therefore, you know, a bit odd that this was the one on which you had a problem.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things. I think when you're doing an 84-meter dive, it's an aggressive dive, whatever. You can't not say it's aggressive. I think, so we were looking for a shipwreck, and it wasn't a shipwreck, but there were some interesting things to go and look at. And I swam around quite a bit. And looking back on the dive, although it was shorter than a normal dive, it was a 20-minute bottom time, or 20-minute to the start of the ascent. So I think I probably did a lot more finning during the bottom phase than I would have done if we'd gone down and found a steamship, say. I think if we'd found a steamship, I'd have been going round it, but I'd have been doing it much more slowly, because I'd have been stopping to take pictures, whereas I was going round to sort of cover a bit of ground to see what was there. So that's one thing. So I do feel, looking back on the dive, I probably, although it was shortish, it was deep, and I think I probably worked a bit harder than I perhaps would have done on a standard wreck dive. So yeah.
Okay. I mean, it's interesting actually. Obviously, I had my scooter and you didn't, which is unusual. Normally, we both do the same. But I guess, you know, do you think maybe that if you'd had a scooter, it might have helped?
It might well have done, yeah, because obviously when you've got the scooter, you don't have to put the work in with your muscles. You're not pumping blood at a greater rate round your body. You can sort of sit and just let the scooter take the strain. So yeah, I think that might have made a difference. But you know, hindsight's great, and all these comments that we'll be making are full of hindsight. But that's the way of it, unfortunately. So,
yeah, for certain. And in terms of gradient factors and partial pressures of O2 and all those kind of things, I mean, you obviously didn't do anything from what you normally do.
No, it's sort of usual things. I think I was trying to think what my gradient factors are. I'd have to go and get my computer to look. But I think it was there something like 60, 85 or something like that. That sounds about right, I think. But I'll check. I could check that if you want me to.
Yeah, I mean, I think people will want to know, so maybe we could put it in afterwards. In fact, I think I can probably get it up.
It might be on there.
Yeah, 65, 85 you've got there, Rick. And probably you were diving 1265?
1265, yeah. And so this was the third day of a 3-day trip. The first dive was 75, the second dive was 55, but then we actually had almost or just over a 24-hour interval between the second dive and this one. So it wasn't as though we were doing a dive after 18 hours or something. It was a full 24 hours after the previous dive. And
did you push up your PO2 to accelerate the deco?
I'm not sure I did on that one. Again, you'd be able to check on the. I'm not sure. I think I left it at 1.3 because I felt it was a dive that, again, perhaps I should have done, because I'm aware that you do sometimes crack, get that oxygen toxicity level going really high, and I felt it because it was a short dive and it wasn't a horrendous amount of deco in the grand scheme of things. It didn't seem so necessary, but again, would that have made a difference? Possibly it would have done. I don't know.
I'm going to I've just checked here, Rick. That green line is your PO2, and you've got 1.4 bar there. So you right.
So I pushed it up. But it looks like I pushed it up fairly late on in the dive. I don't know why that was, but I obviously decided I needed to accelerate things a bit. But I certainly didn't do it from the bottom.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, but there's nothing in this profile. You've done any number of other dives that are similar to this, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And cleared all your stops, and so in that kind of sense, you could argue that it is a undeserved quotation marks bend.
But they're all deserved one way or another, unfortunately.
Yeah, for certain.
My age is not on my side, unfortunately, and I probably worked harder at depth, which contributed. I don't know whether I think I was pretty well hydrated. I'd had about 3 cups of tea on the boat out, but all things considered, it was a shame. It was that one that caught me out, but it has done, unfortunately.
Yeah. So kind of going back to where we were, you were on the boat. You'd obviously mentioned to me that you'd had this stomach pain.
Yeah.
You then, I guess it was probably about 40 minutes later, give or take.
I would guess so, something like that. And then as soon as I said it, I was immediately sorted out with some O2 to breathe. which is where you kindly took video of me and asked how Helen would take it.
Yeah, and I have to say you were in surprisingly good spirits at
Well,
this moment in time.
it didn't seem, and I suppose that's the insidious thing about decompression sickness. It didn't actually seem that bad at that time. It was a little bit of tingling in my leg, but nothing much else. And, you know, if you think about it, when the helicopter came to get me, I virtually sort of skipped along the deck to get to say that the helicopter was coming into the rear port quarter of the boat, and I had to walk out from the wheelhouse to there to sort of be lifted off. And I walked out there without any difficulty at all. And yes, I was aware my legs were tingling, but there was no loss of function at that point at all.
No,
which was quite surprising, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for people who've not had an evacuation or not seen it, you know, this is quite a good example of what happens, and I guess it's people who'll be interested to know. So this is the Coast Guard helicopter in the UK. This one, I think, came from Newquay and was with us actually relatively quickly, within about 20 or 25 minutes, I would say, from when we called it, and maybe a bit longer. But it was, and given the fact that we were kind of 30 odd miles offshore, that's pretty impressive, really. And then I guess what happens is you can see here, so everyone's in the wheelhouse, all the kit is secured and tied down and everything, and then you just the helicopter comes up on the radio and you just do exactly what they say, and they told us to head in a certain direction, I think, and at a certain speed. And as you can see there, everybody is in the wheelhouse kind of watching it. You're still on O2, and we're just kind of waiting for the crewmen to arrive. And in fact, I think this next video is going to be the crewman.
Have to get the windows cleaned.
Yeah. Here he comes.
Yeah.
The classic thing is obviously don't try and help him. They know what they're doing. You can see there.
It must have been very disorientated in seeing him spin like that. He must have been, very dizzy by the time he got on the boat. Amazing, really.
Yeah. But they're obviously pros, aren't they?
The skill of these guys is just incredible, actually.
Yeah,
really is.
So there you go. You don't need to help him at all. He just gets himself all sorted, and I think we're going to see him in a second on clip. And I turned the video off this point because I would imagine the last thing in the world he needs when he gets into a cabin is a whole load of people sticking phones and stuff in his face. So I guess this is the next bit of video, which is
I'm put in a harness. Yeah.
He talked to you first of all, didn't he, Rick?
He did, and he did a few checks on me in the wheelhouse, asked various things, and looked at me. I described my symptoms, and then we went out onto the back quarter of the boat. I was in a harness, and he clipped himself to me, or me to him, and then the pilot, I presume, drops the winch cable back to him. It was very quick once we clipped on. There was no messing about.
I've got to ask you, Rick,
I was most concerned about losing shoes. That was the main thing I was worried about.
That is the question, isn't it? It's a really odd position you're in here, isn't it? Kind of.
Yeah.
You're completely in somebody else's control. I was wondering what was going through your mind.
Yeah.
I think we'd prepared you as well, hadn't we? We'd given you some stuff to take with you so that you weren't completely without any means of comms or anything like that at the far end.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what it was we gave you. You had your phone,
I had
jacket,
my phone, and a few things like that. I don't know. It's but no, it was. So the one thing that I will say, which I will. This is feedback from Helen, actually. So I told everyone on the boat, "Oh, don't worry, I'll contact Helen," and she thinks that was wrong, and she thinks there was a chance that I was in a much worse condition, and I could have expired or become unconscious on the helicopter on the way in. and she thinks it would have made much more sense for the people on the boat to have contacted her anyway, probably without telling me that they were going to do so. So that's feedback and a learning point, I guess, possibly.
Yeah, no.
Not that she would have been able to have done anything, because she was in a music recital or something. So, but yeah.
But useful to have that feedback. I mean, I guess at this point, when you left, you were happy and smiling.
Yeah, absolutely. It almost seemed as though I was just getting a quick trip back to Plymouth, and I wasn't going to have to sit on the boat for another 2 or 3 hours.
I mean, the word on the boat was you just did it because you didn't want to carry your kit up at low water.
Yeah.
But no, okay. So that was you. It's a really good point, that, and really useful, and something I'll definitely stay away for future. And I guess what we don't have is what happened at the far end.
Yeah. So the helicopter doesn't land directly by the hospital or the DDRC. It lands at a Royal Marines base a few miles out of Plymouth. So we landed there, and we were met by an ambulance, and so I then had the blue light treatment to the DDRC, which it all happened in good time, and I was met by the chamber team and Dr. Rosie at the DDRC, who was the on-call doctor, and we then went into the one of the rooms there, and she examined me first of all and did a load of tests, and then proposed an 8-hour treatment, which was the Royal Naval 62 table, I believe, which I think you go down to 18 meters breathing oxygen with air breaks every so often for 8 hours, which was unpleasant. It wasn't it was a bit uncomfortable because I had to be on a trolley, which was not the most comfortable thing, and sitting up, and I was in the big chamber at the DDRC, which is I think an 8-man or a 12-person chamber, I'm not entirely sure. And I was in there with one attendant, and it's a chamber that's pressurized in air, and then you have a plastic hood that goes over your head, which feeds oxygen into it. So I was in there with Tori, who was the attendant on that evening, and we were in there. I think I must have gone in at about 8 p.m, I guess, and because we came out at 4 o'clock in the morning, and you very kindly came and picked me up. But yeah,
and then you got to sleep in one of my kids' bunk beds.
And then I got that was the absolute highlight, the double-decker bus bunk bed, and I slept crawled into the bottom of it, and I was absolutely exhausted by that time. It was difficult to sleep when you're in the chamber, because it keeps being, you're pausing every so often to have an air break and so on, so it's difficult to actually sleep at all. But yeah.
And then you went back in the next day, and I think. And
then I went back in the next day for another, which is this video of me stumbling in. I'm walking, but I'm not the best. And I had a 5-hour treatment, same table, Royal Naval 62 table, 5-hour treatment this time, and then after that I had a number of other treatments, which were shallower treatments, so that I think they were to 12 meters, I think, in oxygen, for just two hours. I had another 7 of those, so I had 9 treatments in all, which was pretty amazing, really. But each day I was getting some improvement. Probably to the last couple of days it was pretty minimal, but each day I was getting significant improvement.
I mean, so I remember when you came out after the first treatment and I picked you up, you were very much like we can see in this video. And then I think this was the incident was on the Thursday. I picked you up on picked you up on Friday morning. This is you going in Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
And then I saw you again on Sunday, and it was amazing actually how much of a difference there was. By the time
how much I'd improved, but even by then. But compared to now, I've improved, absolutely incredibly, really. I was caught in a rain shower yesterday and tried to run. That was still a little bit tricky, but I was still able to crack on at a fair old pace. But I think running will take a little bit more time to get there.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting, isn't it? So did they, in terms of the type of bend that you had?
Yeah.
So
it was a spinal bend, which is not good because worst case scenario is you get bubbles forming in the spinal cord, which ultimately could lead to paralysis, which is why I've got some altered sensation. But if it had been really bad, I could have ended up in a wheelchair, which wouldn't have been much fun. So
not at all. And I guess my understanding is that's the thing that gave you the abdominal symptoms, because it was part of
so that was the really strange thing. And I mentioned the abdominal pain to Rosie, and she speculated that when that happened was the actual moment that I was getting a bubble forming, and it was, as it was forming, I was getting some pain associated with it. And that was really interesting because as I think I mentioned earlier, I thought it happened at about 50 meters, and it opens that box of tricks of deep stops. And we've stopped doing deep stops, but in fact, if I'd done a deep stop, would I've mitigated against it and helped? I don't know. But it's an interesting thought. But because if you'd done, I think my first scheduled stop was 33 meters or something. Which is there. Yeah, the little dip down was when I released the shot. So halfway to that would have been 60-ish probably, wouldn't it? So, which might have been before I got the pain. And if I'd stopped there for a minute or two, who knows? Another if only, but we'll never know.
It's, we're all just we're kind of speculating at this point, aren't we?
Yeah.
So I guess you've obviously had a fantastic treatment, both from the Coast Guard and the ambulance service and DDRC, and it's probably worth mentioning again that we're doing this fundraiser for DDRC to try and raise some money, which would be great.
Yeah, which would be fantastic. Yeah.
And I guess the thing that people will want to know is, fantastic that you're walking much better than we've seen in that video, even if you're not kind of running marathons yet. But what does the future look like for you, Rick?
Unfortunately, it means that I'm not going to be in a position to do any of the deep diving that I know and love. I have to call it a day, because in a way it's been a shot across the bows, so to speak. I can't risk another bend, and the problem being that if I had another bend, it would almost certainly happen in the same place. I think there's some evidence that the sort of bend I've had is perhaps related to using trimix, so a helium bend rather than a nitrogen-based bend. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to call time on my deep diving career. I'm hoping that I might be able to carry on doing some shallow stuff. I've got to have 3 months off diving completely, and it just so happens that I'm about to go to South Africa for an overland trip for almost 3 months, so it all fits in quite nicely, and basically means that I'll have a review with the DDRC in January, and we'll talk about what the future holds. But I think I'm going to be busted down to recreational at the very least. But the thing is, I am a photographer, and I know you've seen my wreck photos, but I do take photos of other stuff as well, and the other stuff will have to take precedent, unfortunately. I'll miss going to those deep wrecks when the viz is fantastic, but that's one of those things. Yeah.
For absolute certain, we will miss having you, and me in particular, because some of the best diving that I have done in the last however many years.
Yeah, and me as well. It's been absolutely incredible, but it's one of those things that I can't risk doing the same thing again, and I've got to respect my body on that.
It makes complete sense, and it is absolutely the sensible decision to do. There's no doubt about that. But really sad at the same time. I guess just before we conclude, then, Rick, is just to say, is there what are your kind of takeaways from this? Is there anything that you think would be useful for other people to know?
There's all sorts of things. It's that whole list of if onlys, and the problem is you don't know whether that would have made a difference. I think I did everything right on the day, and I was using everything the same as I'd done the previous 2 days, but it caught me out, and I think that is the main thing that you can take, is that decompression sickness can catch you unawares. It can be like rolling the dice, and you can just be unlucky on that particular day, and it'll unfortunately catch you out. And that's what I've learned to my cost, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay. So, the fact is, what we do has a level of risk, and there's a kind of uncertainty to that risk. And, it's just one of those things we have to, people who do this kind of things, it's one of the things we live with, we've got to live with. But I guess the flip side of it is, and it goes back to that point when you left the boat, you were kind of had a bit of a tingling in your leg. 24 hours later, you were struggling, not quite struggling to work, but it was more difficult.
It was a problem. It was a problem. Yeah.
And I guess maybe the for me, the thing to take away is, if somebody thinks they've got decompression illness, they probably have, and therefore you need to start doing the right things for them to get them in the right place to have it treated.
Yeah. I think the one on the day, I think the one mistake I really made was not telling other people about the hot and cold difference on my legs, because I think our good friend Will had the same sort of symptoms, which I'd sort of forgotten about. But if I'd said to you I've had hot and cold legs, you'd have perhaps flagged up that perhaps you've got a decompression thing happening, and so I might have gone on O2 a bit earlier. But I think that's the only thing where I fell short of what I should have done. I should have identified that and mentioned it. So I
think it's one of those things. Is we all come up from dives, and you all feel body is it's very difficult, isn't it? There isn't a marked threshold between something being wrong and something being right. There's kind of shades of grey, isn't there?
Yeah. So it is what it is, and I'm here to tell the tale, and I'm here to be able to change what I do, but carry on doing what I do, hopefully.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Well, we'll all look forward to more of your fantastic shallow fun.
And I've already told Steve Green I'm going to come out on one or two of those trips out of Plymouth next year, because I want to get a load of topside pictures, which I never have, because I'm always diving. So it'll be nice to actually come out and spend a bit of time taking some nice pictures of people getting ready to go jump in the water.
Oh, that's brilliant, because it'd be great to have you on the boat as always. Anyway. So thank you. Well, good. I think that's probably the right time to draw things to a close, Rick. But I just want to thank you for being willing to do this. To
not at all. I just hope people can take on board that Especially the thing about abdominal pain, because I think that's something that you never see it in any diving textbook, that is a possible symptom of decompression sickness. But I think I've known other people who've had symptoms of pain during a decompression incident. But it is something that should be out there.
Yeah. Well, hopefully by doing this, we've got it out there.
Yeah.
So I guess we conclude just by saying to people, look, if you want to support DDRC, there is the fundraiser at the bottom. It would be great if you could give whatever you can spare, and it will, go to a really good cause, which is helping people like Rick, and in fact a few of our friends
Lots
as well.
of other people as well. Yes.
Yeah, getting treated and being put back together again. So. And obviously for me, all the usual sort of stuff. If you can, like the video, if you can, leave a comment, even if it's just to say thank you, Rick. And other than that, I will see you all on the next one. So thank you very much and goodbye.